Start recording. Yeah. All right. Starting pretty late today. It's a half hour in. There's not going to be any Q&A at the end of this. That's just the way it is. Welcome everyone to Handmade Hero, Show We Code a Complete Game live on stream. Today I want some more profile UI. I want it, and I'm going to get it, with or without you. So buckle up. 263 is the day number, so 262 source code is what you want to start with if you're trying to follow along at home, and I hope you are, because why am I even streaming this if you aren't? I have no idea, right? It's a good question. It's a very, very good question. Here is the Handmade Hero code base. Here is me running it. Here is me opening the profile window. Here is what I want. What I want now is some buttons up here. I want some buttons that I can push, like a back button. Like right now I can drill down into something and I can see what's going on, but I can't actually get back to where I was because we don't have a back button. I need a back button. I want to be able to switch between the per frame view and this view, which we could trivially do if we had a button. So I want that as well. So I want some buttons up here. That's one thing I want. And another thing I want is I want some buttons down here that go with this piece of information, and maybe I want to move these to the top as well. But I want some buttons that allow me to like pause the stream, so because this is like running in real time, I want to be able to pause, and we've got many frames of back data. I want to be able to go back to previous frames so that I can see what they were. You feel me, dog? So let's do that. Let's make that happen. Let's make it happen, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's just like sometimes you just got to go to the gym and you just got to lift and have protein powders or powder your protein. I don't really know what bros do. I feel like they probably have a lot of protein in the mix in there somewhere. So that's good, and they do like squats or something. So that's good, maybe. I don't really know. Point being, I'm gonna make this stuff happen, and the bros can join us or not. It's not my problem. I don't care. Here we go. I'm gonna move this stuff to the top. So basically, we have the main menu stuff drawing. I don't even know why we call it a main menu at this point. Old legacy naming. That's the kind of stuff that we don't often get a chance to clean up on the stream, but that I would probably clean up in real life when I have lots of hours to program. And I'm not talking incessantly. So this stuff here, this menu, obviously, we would probably want to make sure that our main menu starts after our debug text happens. And so what I'd want to do, I think, is there's the @y thing that we have in here. I'd want to make sure that that gets picked up. So after we do these debug text lines, I want to make sure that gets picked up. So I don't actually remember, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't even remember what, where this thing starts. It looks like it starts at the trees UIP. In this case, we're just drawing each individual tree. And so I suppose what we'd have to do that is just move the tree down a certain amount. Now that I think about that, I suppose that's probably dumb, because why would we special case these? I have no idea why we would special case these when we could just make these be things that you control. That seems like a way more obvious thing to do. So probably what we'd want to do is just say, hey, get rid of these all together, right? Throw them up in the debug element, printout nonsense that we've got, where we're printing out different kinds of elements in here. So because we've got like the profile graph nonsense happening. Where is that at? Where am I search at? This thing, right? So here we are in draw element. We've got a bunch of different elements we can draw. I think what I'd rather do is just say, you know what? Let's just make these be elements, right? So now I've got, in here, I've got last frame or something, last frame info. I don't know, right? Something like this. and then we just like print that out, and that way it can just be its own little special sauce thing that happens in there. And similarly, we could have this be, I don't know what this would be. This would be like debug memory info or something like that. I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. And that's, you know, how that's going to go. And it's good, and everyone loves it. So all we need to do is tie that into our system. You can see here where we've kind of got this layout stuff where we can do the various things with debug event printout. What I want to do here is be able to lay out one of these elements. I don't actually know if, it seems to me like this is a little bit long in the tooth. Like this is probably something we should make really a little more easy to do, because we don't really have anything in particular that's complex about this, right? Once we have a piece of text, we get its size, we produce the dimensions for it, we lay out an element for it, right? And then we print it out. And it seems to me like that is something that we probably want to wrap, right? There's no reason not to wrap that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a utility for that that's just internal, like, you know, basic text element. Typing is difficult sometimes. I don't know. So something like this, and then we would just pass in what those things are. So we have the text. We know we've got the debug state, and then we need that layout. So we need to grab this guy right here. And it looks like actually we don't need the debug state. It looks like that we wrapped that. It looks like that's in here. So that's fine. All right. So we do the layout. We need to provide an item interaction, and that's just a thing like this sort of thing that I suppose we should probably just pass in, because different people will have different ones of those, and they may want to make different ones. But other than that, I think that's it. Right? Everything else here is pretty much just by, just goes by the book. We'll pass a color, but we will make it white by default so that if you don't actually want to pass color, you don't have to. And I think that's it. So I'm going to try, before I do anything else, I'm going to try making this work like so. No, not like that. I so need a new version of 4Coder with better indentation. I actually licensed the source code to it, so I may just go do that. It's like one of the only things that I notice day to day now. It's like that in the auto expansion. Other than that, like I literally have not. Yeah, it's great. I'm so excited about this text editor, and the fact that it's programmable in C is so good. Yeah, but I want to fix that indentation. I think it would be pretty easy to fix too, but you can just see how it picks wrong stuff a lot of times. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm pretty sure if I went into the source code, it would not be hard to find, because it's pretty close, and a lot of times it's right. It looks like it doesn't understand multi-line things. So basically, like, it'll get the indentation of this okay. I would prefer it to be lined up to the parentheses, but it picks that, which would be fine. But the next line, if there's stuff here, it oftentimes gets wrong, and I don't know why, right? Like if this was a comma, or maybe not, I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know what the circumstances are. Like, there you go. So I don't know why it decided to do it there, right? And so there's just some things like that that seem like, I don't know, they seem like it would take very little time for me to fix them. So I'm interested in looking at that, because if I could fix those, I think this, in my mind anyway, goes from being an alpha to being basically shipped. Like, I'm like, it does everything I need. All right, so let's see. If that works, which I don't know if it will, and I'm going to have to if these guys out, obviously, for the time being here. So if that works, for printing our menu, nice texture loading. Yeah, okay. If that works, then we should be able to use it for these as well now. So these guys can just be can basically just do this. And I guess they don't need to pass the color because we are just vanilla white at this point. Sounds like some really bad Disney movie. So yeah, that's just text and text. Like so. And actually, we don't need that at all. And so now I think all we need is to have these particular doodads defined, right? So in our grand list of things, I guess this would be an interface. In our grand list of things that you can add in the debug system, you can now add some more things here, like debug memory infos and stuff like that. And excuse me. The thread interval graph stuff, you can see that we do that here where we do like debug thread interval graph, we do this thing. I think what we want to do is say debug UI or something, or debug UI thingy, UI element. And then in here we would just pass the type. So we'd say like, oh, whatever you want that one to be, we'll do it, right? And so this will just be like some name that you're trying to pass to it, and then we'll build it, and it'll be great, and it's just awesome, and it's fine, and everyone loves it. Like that movie with like Lindsay Lohan and the car. So we can go ahead and just make this one work like that. So instead of the old way we were calling it, we can call it this way. And you see why I did this, right? I don't want to have like a separate function for each of those. When I already have to type an identifier in to define them, I might as well just pass the identifier, right? And then I only need to make a special one of these if for some reason in the future, right, I needed to pass different sorts of parameters or do other fussing. But I don't really need to do that here, so I might as well just make it one function that can generate any one of our special elements. So now I do that. We don't actually have anything in particular here that I guess that I would put, but like, last frame, or I don't know. But anyway, now you can see we've got these guys in here. So we now have the profile, which we did before, and now we also have that other old data that we wanted. That now puts us in an excellent position to generate some more UI controls, which is also what I want. So if you take a look at, well, what's kind of interesting here, though? Why are those in the wrong order? Do we do some kind of a push down for when we add things to a set? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but they go in reverse order of where they are, and I don't know why. I feel like we must have decided to do like a singly linked list there that doesn't do push on end. That's my assumption anyway. Meow, 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 meow. Let's find out. That was a little meow song for you. I hope you enjoyed it. So what we want here is we want the place where we do the get element for event, or whatever it's called, like get element from it. That's it. Get element from event. Get element from event. There it is. So when we do add element to group right here, I'm wondering, is that a singly linked thing that's happening here? Dlist insert, Mr. Dlist insert. Yeah, man, that's a problem. You guys know what I'm saying? Check it out. Check it out right there. See how that works? That inserts at the head of the list, right? You know what I'm saying? it says that the next thing is the first thing in the list. So all we need to do is do like the same exact thing, like MrExactness.com. It's a wonderful company, Series C funded for $11 billion. Is all we need to do here is say like, oh, okay, what we actually want is we want to link up to the Sentinel's previous so that we are now the last thing. So our prior link will be whatever was the previous last link, and our next link will be this one. And then we just go in and set those two to point back to us, and we're done. Right? So same bit for finishing up, but otherwise a little bit different there. So could just do as last, right? And so if we do insert as last, now those things will go in the order we said, and I want them to go in the order that we said, right? Because I feel like that's just better, because inside one of these I want them to be accurate. Now we still, I don't think, create these in that order, probably, right? Because that'd be in a different place. Add group to group is using that as well. So we might as well, I don't think we ever really want them to be out of order. We don't, reverse order. We'd always want to be the same order. So I feel like this is actually the, right, because this is the order they actually appeared in the program. Okay. So that seems good to me, right? That seems like some sexy hiking right there. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that. So now I want to add a little bit of of special sauce in here. I want to sauce this up, and so what I'm going to do is, before, what we were doing is we're always viewing the most recent frame, but what I'd rather do is have a viewing frame ordinal or something like this. And by default, we could have the viewing frame ordinal always track the most recent frame ordinal. But then if you scrub, you could view a different one, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a way for us to edit the viewing frame ordinal first, or at least just display it. And then I'm going to put in the pause, and then come back and have everyone tie into the viewing frame ordinal. Does that make sense? I swear to, seriously guys, that it better make sense, because it was so straightforward what I just said. I don't even want to hear it. That's not me. I'm not even going to look at the chat. I don't even want to know if that's not making sense to you, because it better make sense to you. So what I'm going to put in here is a frame slider or something like that. We're going to call it a frame slider, okay? Frame slider is what it is. And if you don't want a frame slider, then maybe you should have picked a different program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a debug data block here for no reason. And I'm going to call that or debug control, right? And in there, I'm going to make some of these UI elements. I'm going to make this frame slider. I wonder if our UI element, I wonder if I wasn't maybe a little bit of a premature pants on this. And really, you should be able to just do UI element without putting anything after it. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. I'm going to keep doing that for no apparent reason, because I can. And so we'll put the debug frame slider in there, and maybe we'll have a debug thing. You know what? We're just going to call it debug frame slider. That's it. That's all they're going to be. And if you want more than that, well, you're going to have to go download the source code and add it, because, you know, that's your problem. So if we go to debug, go back to debug here, I'm going to go ahead and add that in as one of the things we can draw. So in cure, where we do, that's not good, not what I wanted, not what I wanted to do. Switching to modal editing has been pretty tricky for me. I don't mind telling you. It's been a lot better in 4Coder than it was in Emacs, but it's still pretty rough on me because I'm not used to it compared to non-modal, which is how I've been programming for 30 years. So anyway, here in this little doodad, I'm going to implement one of these frame sliders. And in order to implement a frame slider, really all I have to do is make one of these that you can kind of, I guess, size. But I don't know that I really want this to be sizable. I think I might just want it to be a fixed size, and that fixed size probably should depend, to be honest with you, on the width of the window, but I'm not really caring so much about that sort of thing at the moment. So, you know, you're just going to have to live with that, and you're going to live with that. So happy birthday, and, you know, that's, there you go. So I'm going to actually look at this as an inline block. And in fact, we're going to use that instead. So, because I don't actually need any of the graph stuff. I don't need to make a type for the frame slider because it's always going to be, it's just, actually, I guess to be honest with you, we don't even need settings for this thing because it doesn't have any settings. It's just a little UI element that allows you to control the frame. And so at the moment, I guess really all I need to do is have that have one of those dims. Where are you, Mr. Dim? No, there it is. So the inline block thingy, I just need to have one of these dims that we set manually. And so, you know, it's 1800 by, I don't know, 32. We'll find out. And then when we do begin element rectangle and end element, this time I'm not actually going to do anything in there. Just nothing happens. It's just going to make that, and it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And it's not sizable, so it's just going to be that specific size that it is. And then what I can do is say, well, I'll go ahead and draw the frame slider. So draw frame slider or something like this. And I'll basically do the exact same thing I did with the profiler, right? I'll say, here's all the stuff we were doing, so that you can do whatever you want to do with it, but then I'll implement it up in its own function for now, just to keep that switch statement a little more clear, so you don't have to read too far through it. I don't always do that. Sometimes I like the switch statements to get long. It depends on my mood and what the code is. So anyway, here's draw frame slider. And the first thing that I want to do in draw frame slider is I really want to draw this, like, basically the same kind of grid that we were drawing before. So draw frame bars actually is almost exactly what I want. So I'm going to start with this code and basically chop a ton of it out, if that makes sense. What I actually want is, yeah. So what I actually want to do is say, okay, there's no mouse stack at the moment. We are going to fill in the rectangle. It's not going to be called profile rect. Obviously, I think we'll just call it element rect, or maybe I'll call it like total rect. Totally wrecked, man. Like after we went to the gym and did the squats, I was totally wrecked. Like what? So anyway, then we come through here, and we don't actually need to do any of sort of the element stuff, but we need to do the frame index stuff, right? So this is all not necessary. None of this is relevant at all. It does not matter, blah, 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 but this does. Right? So yeah. Wait, what was that at X? What did that say? Bar width. All right. So this is going to step us through each of the individual bars, and this I don't care about at all. So this min x and the min max are always going to be the same as well, right? So the min x is always going to be whatever the total rect min x was, and we don't need any of this. And the max x is always going to be whatever. So we're just doing literally the you know, a square sort of thing. Well, it won't necessarily be a square, but a little rectangle for every frame, just striped across a bar. That's it. That's the whole thing we're doing. Nothing else. So then we have the same construction where we do the outline, and all that is exactly the same. The color in this case, I don't know what I want it to be, but you know, it could be white or it could be a gray. Maybe it should be more of a gray. Something like that. And then we would still do an is in rectangle, but at the moment, you know, I'm not really going to use that. We're going to probably implement some code there in just a second. But at first, I just want this to be working properly for drawing a little thing that we could use for frames. That's total rect as well. Total rect. Total rect. Viewing element is, in fact, yeah, in fact, you know what? There is no element. Is there? Wait. What? No, I can just pass the regular element. Meow, 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 meow. Meow. There we go. What is the problem? Layout element to debug element. What are you talking about? What are you even talking about right now? Oh, that's the yeah. All right. Yep, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Little parameter masking there. It's all right. Don't worry about it. It's done. And this is layout element. Okay. So in theory now, maybe I'll have something if I didn't totally mess it up. And it turns out I did totally mess it up, so that's great. Nice work, Muratori. You're off the team. So here's a frame slider. I seem to be only drawing the very first one. That's probably because if you want something to happen every time through a for loop, here's a pro tip. Remember, I've been programming for 30 years, so take my word on this. It helps to put it inside the loop. Tends to get called more when you put it in there. So there's actually what I wanted for my frame slider. That's what we were going for. Okay. I feel like that may be too many frames. Too many frames. But you know, what are you going to do? Sometimes you have too many frames. 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 So the next thing I want to do is I want to make one of these things solid. And the one that I want to be solid is the one that we're viewing. I want to make, if this is the frame that, well, okay, you know what? I'm not even going to say stuff because words are difficult and they have vocabularies with them and letterings and stuff. And so what I actually just want to do is this, right? I basically want to, you know, say, you know, are we going to highlight this thing? And then I'm going to check it against some of these things. So it's like if the frame index happens to be, you know, the viewing frame ordinal, then I want to highlight it, right? And I'm going to set the highlight color. So the viewing frame, the one that we're currently looking at, I'm going to make that be yellow. Because yellow is the color of urine, which is an essential byproduct, and Gandhi drank it, supposedly. I wasn't there. That's just what I heard. And obviously he liberated India from the British. And so pretty much as far as science is concerned, that means if you would like to liberate your country from an oppressive occupant, which at this point, honestly, is probably my country, because that's the sort of thing we do. Apparently we can't manage to stay home ever. You should drink your own urine, because that's what we've got to go on. So the most recent frame, so the viewing frame will be yellow. The most recent frame, and like the collation frame will be, I think, maybe some color that shows that you can't look at that one, like that'll be red, you know. The oldest frame, I don't know that we super care about too much, but I'll make that one green. And the most recent frame, well, actually the most recent frame I guess I'll make be green, and then the oldest frame I'll make be sort of a darker green. That's what I'll do. And so all I want to do here is say, let's pick out what those ordinals are. We're already updating them, but then what I want to do is say, if I wanted to highlight one of those ordinals so I could see it during the sweeps, if that's true, then I'm going to go ahead and just like draw the rectangle with a solid backing so that it's like very clearly there. And I'm going to draw it in the high color that we've set above. And I want this to be visible, so I need to draw it kind of on the upper layer, right? And I think we can do stuff like this. I don't really know if we can, but I think we can. So viewing frame ordinal, these all have to be off of the debug state. And why I didn't do that to begin with, I don't know. Probably it was your fault on the stream somehow. You weren't paying attention, and then that happened. So here's debug control now. And you can kind of see what's happening there, right? It looks more or less exactly like what we would expect. We don't have a way to pause debug yet, which is what we want to do, but you can see basically you've got the red frame, which is the frame that's being collated. You've got the green frame right behind it, which is the most recent one, and then you've got that other green frame that shows like this is where debug data starts. Now, if I'm not very much in error, I just want to visually show you something here, and I'm going to explain it, and it's probably not going to happen because that's what happens when I explain strings on stream. But what you can see here is that we've got per frame arena space remaining. We've got tons. And so, you know, and I think now that I think about it, I don't think we'd sync enough events to make it happen. So I think I probably can't show you this. But I'll just say this. I'll say what would happen if we could make it happen, which I don't think we can. But we could go force it to. We've got per frame arena space remaining right now of 130 megabytes. Now what that means is that we're storing, right, we've got frame arrays that are 256 frames long. And what that means is that we will store 256 frames of data if we have enough space to store them. But if we started syncing so many debug events per frame that we actually didn't have enough memory to store 256 back frames, then what would happen is we'd store less back frames. And what you would see at that point is the red, which is what's being synced now, what's being collated now, and the green right before it would start to diverge. And you would have a gap of frames that were essentially not valid. They just had nothing in them. So if you viewed them, you just get nothing. It would say there was nothing happened. Because that's data that's been freed. So when we switch to the game, you can now see that we start using up a lot more space. But unfortunately, we don't use up enough more to get down to 0. Now what we could do is we could artificially limit the amount of memory the debug system actually has to work with. And then I could show you that happening in practice. So here is you know, some sub-arena stuff, right? So I'm going to switch this to some testing where here we have, what is this, 128K of memory. That's not very much. So maybe let's give it 8 megabytes of memory to store debug information in. Okay? So it's fixed to storing. That's how much you're giving the system to work with. And you can see right here that number going down, and then it plateaus. And that's because, like I said, it's only storing 256 frames back. And the reason we did that is because we used to have it so it just stored as far back as it could. But I wanted to have some fixed arrays that we could jump around in quickly and see, not have to traverse linked lists all the time to get to them. Okay, so let's say we jump into the game now. Yikes. Is that really true? So that is a little concerning. That means that the number of things that were stored in this frame and the number that we freed were not coincident, which is not good, to say the least, right? This is an assertion that I added to, because we record every time we use one of the, every time we allocate a stored event to put it in there. And when we free a frame, we expect that the number freed should match. What I don't know, yeah, and when we, well, you know what I don't know? I don't know one slight piece of information that I should check first, which is that when we call freeframe, we don't necessarily clear that data. So I think what I probably want to do is move this up to here, where we say after we free a frame, we always zero it, because if we tried to free a frame twice, that would actually happen. I don't think that should ever happen, and I don't think that was the bug there, but it occurred to me. So before I start debugging, I want that to be fixed, if that makes sense, because I'll forget. So when we take this frame and after we think we're finished with it, I just want to wipe it out so that there's nothing left in it. Okay, so now let's see. I want to see why that is, because that should not happen. Interesting. So I guess that was actually the bug when we tried to free the frames twice. That's weird. All right, so let's watch this happen in a little more detail here, right? So I'm going to bolt out of here. I'm going to run. So here we are tracking, and we've got, if we take a look at how much memory we've got, we still have 7 megs free. Now we're going to dive into the thing where we start syncing just a ton of debug frames, a ton of debug data every frame. So I hit the space bar, and you can see it right there, how it starts to fall backwards, right? And now we have the case where this range right here is actually the only valid part, right? It's only between there and there that actually has debug data. And we don't have any from the red forward to here, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm not sure. That's probably, I'm not super, I don't, again, if this were not on stream, I would probably go investigate that double free, because I feel like I don't super understand why free frame was getting called on a frame that had already been freed. And so I feel like that's probably a bug. Since it is in the debug code and we are on stream, I'm not going to do that. But I'm just going to point that out. I would ordinarily go do it. So anyway, what I wanted to say was, like I think I gave this sort of speech a while back where I was like, on stream I tend not to debug things nearly as thoroughly as I normally would, to try to keep things sort of more coherently together. And basically, like, you know, I try to remind people of that, because in general, I would not want you to be as lax about pursuing those things if you were actually working 8 hours a day on programming. You should not be doing that, really. But I don't know any way to not do that, because on stream it would be even harder to follow what it is that I'm doing day to day if I jumped around as much as I normally would in that case. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, on the frame slider here, after we draw it, what I would like to do now is make it so that I can set, you know, like I'd like to set the value of, like if you click in there, I want to be able to set that as an interaction. And so if I go to debug interface.h, and we look at, is it debug? Does debug interface have a shadow? No, I don't think it does. I don't think it does have it. I think it's in here. Then what I want to do is I want to be able to make an interaction that will set, you know, what frame you're talking about. And so in order to do that, what I'm going to do here is say, well, where's my interaction code? There it is. There's going to be a thing that's like debug interaction set view frame ordinal. I don't even know, something like that. Yeah, let's just say it's that. And so then I'm going to make one of these here where I can say like, okay, debug interaction, and get rid of all this stuff. And we'll say that the next hot interaction in this case is this one, and it is set view frame ordinal and the, you know, whatever it is, the index, and we should have one of these. We don't at the moment. U32, you know, uint32 or something. We want to set our uint32 to be equal to the frame index that we currently have. And that's just all fine and stuff. So that is what that will do. We don't have a graph ID, do we? Oh, we do. It should just be called debug ID or slider ID, I guess. So we'll set the slider ID. We don't actually need that. No one's going to use that at all, but we'll just set it anyway. And that can be our interaction. We could also, if we wanted to, make this happen. And by this, I mean, I don't really know what we were using that for exactly, but I just mean, hey, let's print out whatever the frame index is so that you can see which ordinal it is in case anyone cares at all, which they probably don't. And really all I was saying with that was, you know, like, hey, you could see which ordinal it was. Probably what I'd want to do instead is print out how many frames back we were, which maybe I'll do if I'm in the mood for love. You know, just in that mood where it is just voluptuous and sensual. So I'm going to go ahead and search for that interaction code because, frankly, I don't remember anything about that at all. So let's go ahead and go down there to where we actually do that. And here's basically all of our interaction code that we've written so far. So here's an interaction. It doesn't really do anything interesting at all other than just set, what was it called? We had a name for it. Viewing frame ordinal. So it sets the viewing frame ordinal equal to whatever this guy says it should be. And that's all it does. That's all it do. Yeah, and so if I come in here and I drag select on this, that's not good. Someone want to tell me what that's even... Oh. What? Who wrote this ridiculous code? That's garbage. This is just plain ridiculous. I do not know who thought this was even remotely going to work, because surprise, it's totally not. This probably wasn't actually a surprise to anyone. Yeah, I don't even know why that would be a surprise. Oop, whoops. What did I don't know what F key I hit there. Don't even know. So that allows us to kind of do some stuff, but it's not good. It's not really slidery. So I probably need to make that interaction a little bit better. We'll leave it like that for now, just for the second, just for the splittest of little splits, seconds, or spleckants, as they're called in when you're really super advanced at programming. You use the term spleckants for split seconds. I don't know if you knew that. It's a computer science term. So what I want to do is I want to start taking all the places right now where people were using the ordinal most recent, and I want to basically make them all use the other one. So I want to say that I'm going to replace like most recent frame ordinal meow with viewing frame ordinal. And I can't see because it's behind my head, I think. So that's unfortunate. You know what? Oh, I know what I can do. I can switch over into this thing because my head's not on this side. Bam. Yep. So now we can do most recent frame ordinal and viewing frame ordinal, and I can say what I want. So draw profile, yes please. Draw frame slider, no. Stored event, thread interval graph, yes. Yes. Oh, that's a tough one. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Debug begin interact. Oh, man. No. I guess. I'm going to say no. 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 And then I'm going to say last frame time. Yeah. Yeah. So this is now going to be awesome, is what this is going to be. It's going to be super awesome. Maybe, possibly. Or approaching the awesomeness. So now we can just kind of go through here and we can pick any frame that we wanted to view, right? And we can view that frame. So we can see like, oh, how many milliseconds was each of these frames? You know, what was the information available at that time? What did the profile look like on that frame? And similarly, all this stuff would also be correct. So for example, like in here, if we were doing some stuff, I feel like it's still, I guess one problem is it's when it's doing the viewing, it's viewing the state of the events at that time. So I guess when we actually draw, I'm gonna have to not do that, right? Because it's actually taking the that was a flaw in the plan. I admit that. I admit that up front. Let's go address that. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Okay, so in terms of how the debug views go, that's looking up into like whether something's expanded or not. I don't feel like that actually should. I don't feel like that actually should have caused a problem. Hold on one second. Let's just figure out exactly why that was happening. Where's the view hash? Get debug view. Oops. Get or create debug view 4. So we do a hash here, and with the requisite comment. Remember, you always have to put that comment in. So what are we hashing? We are hashing the two U32s for the debug ID for that thing, whatever that thing is, right? And so when we call get or create debug view 4, what are we actually passing for those debug IDs? Now this one we don't. This is not an expand or collapse kind of scenario, right? So that's not the one we actually care about. The one that we actually care about is, for example, one of these. And so to get that one, where we get that view, we use an ID that's generated from the tree and the link. And the link is actually in the tree itself, right? So I'm gonna take a look. That's in the iterator for this, which is the debug variable iterator. So where is the debug variable iterator? I don't know why we do that in order, by the way. I think that was because we were trying to show how to do it, but it's kind of dumb. Anyway, debug variable links are stable. So I don't really understand why that would have been the case. That's a little bit puzzling. So let me see. I wish to understand more. I wish to know more. Expanded. Well, actually, I guess I really just want to look at toggle expansion. Toggle expansion. Expansion toggled. Toggle expansion. So this is toggle expansion. And get or create debug view 4 is just looking at whatever the ID was for this interaction. So I don't see why that does not make a lot of sense to me. I don't see why that would be sort of variant. For toggle value, yeah, I'm not sure what we want to do for event editing. Like, it's theoretical that you'd want to allow editing of the events back in the past, but really what we want to do is just not allow you to edit things in the past because they won't take effect. You know what I mean? So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either way. So this, I don't know, this may have to wait to debug. Like, that's super weird. I do not understand. Because there still should be, I guess it's because the stuff isn't in there yet. Oh, yeah, I guess that is the case. So it's looking for those things. There's nothing actually in that slot yet. Okay. Yeah, no, now that I think about it, that's actually correct. So it's going to try to display stuff, but there's nothing in there on that frame because it hasn't been written yet. So I guess that is actually fine. I guess that's okay. All right, so let me just finish up in the last 5 minutes what I was going to do, and we'll see if that continues to be true. But I guess that's actually correct because it just won't draw anything if there's nothing there. So it's not that it isn't collapsed or expanded, it's that there's nothing there. When we jump into the game, since we set the debug size down and we leave a big gap there, whenever the gap of debug data would come across, it wouldn't have, yeah, okay, it all makes perfect sense now. All makes perfect sense now. Oh, programming. So anyway, all that really means is I just have to finish up and then we'll be fine. So when we actually do debug start, what we want to do is we want to see whether or not we are paused, right? And you know, we'll want to do an if paused here basically, but right now we don't have that quite yet, or we don't actually use it, right? But if we are not paused, then we want like most recent frame ordinal to overwrite viewing frame ordinal. So normally, like, you know, we're running the same way we were before. And so when you look at something, you're looking at the current frame and it's telling you that, and it's all fine, right? But then we need a way to basically pause and make it so that we're not going to continue anymore. By the way, like, let's talk about this. Like, that's pretty baller right there. We can just tear that off if we want to because we're awesome. It's like I just want to like move my UI around. Anyway, so if I want to, right, I can, what I want to be able to do now is pause this so that I can then go in and like click. Right now I can't click on it anymore because if I were to click on it, it'll just immediately get overwritten, right? So another thing I could do is I could make it so that if I click on the debug, if I click on one of these, it'll just automatically stop. That's another thing I could do. But either way, the primary point here is we have to implement some way of pausing. So I think we had a variable for pause. Like I think we had a pause, right? But I don't think it does anything anymore. So you know, it's nice to have a variable called paused, but if you never reference that variable anywhere other than to set it to false, not gonna do a lot for you, right? That's another pro tip right there that you can use to become a better programmer, is if you don't use a variable, it won't have an effect. Very important. So what we want to do here is say, if we're not paused, then we are going to overwrite that. Now, what we need to implement now is just some way of saying when we are paused, don't overwrite stuff anymore, right? So, you know, like here. So this sort of situation, when we come through and we call collate debug event records, so in here, when we see a frame marker and we do the collation frame, you can kind of see here we come through and we increment the frame ordinal, you know, this sort of thing. I think all we have to do is just not do that, if that makes sense. So basically, we would just free that frame immediately and then just keep going. So we would do if debug state, well, I guess we actually want to do it the opposite way around. If we're paused, then we just do free frame, debug state, collation frame ordinal. Goodbye, been nice knowing you. Off it goes. And otherwise, we advance. So then what I'll say is, well, you know, when we set this thing, probably we wanted to pause. And then we'll just have to make a way to non-pause, right? But there's our profile, there's our frame slider-y thing, and so if I click there, and now we are paused, and here we go, right? Which is pretty great. Awesome. Very happy about that. Yeah, so we're getting there, man. This is starting to be some pretty sweet action. Now, we need an unpause, obviously. We'll do that next week. And we need those buttons I was talking about. We also need to go finally fix the OpenGL multi-threading thing. Oh, OpenGL. So that we don't have to worry about texture downloads still being wrong. So much for reading white papers about how to download textures. Anyway, so what we want to do here, right, is I just wanted to demonstrate too that we track all the debug data now. So for example, this dude, right, if we open up, now that I've selected him, if we open up the simulation and look at the entity data, we don't actually need this profile data here. You know, it goes all around and we track that data, right? And now if we want to, we can also, you know, just say like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and zoom back through there. So not only like will our profile be, you know, accurate back then, but so will all of the data we captured. Like all of it's still good. So we can look at our data and our profile together and do all the operations we would normally be able to do. Like if we want to zoom in on one of these things, we can. We can look at every last little thing. And not only can we look at it, but once we look at it, we can actually see how it varies over time too, right? By looking at, was there any differences between these? Yeah, this profiler is baller. I think by the end of next week, I'm basically just gonna like have to like call the Smithsonian and be like, do you want to put this profiler in there? Because it's pretty much the best profiler that like America has ever made. Okay? Put it next to John F. Kennedy's brain or whatever it is you're keeping in there that no one cares about, because this profiler is going to be cooler than that by a substantial margin. All right, I'll take literally 5 minutes of Q&A, but then I gotta go. FWE4, how much would it cost to save draw buffer snapshots so when you pause you can show the visual state it was in, or maybe save enough data to resented the frame? Honestly, most of that's just OpenGL busy work, right? So if we only cared about working with our software renderer, the answer is this trivial. You just allocate 256 back buffers and you point to a different one each time. Free. So it's literally free. Like there's a little more cache, maybe if that ever stayed hot, but it probably doesn't through the cycle. So it's just free. So software renderer, it's free. Hardware renderer, it probably takes a little more doing, but basically the same technique would probably work. So what we would do is we'd just allocate 256 back buffers on the card and just be like, hey, you better have a card with a lot of memory, bro. And then each time we would render to one of those first, then blip that one to the screen. And then we could just go back to the other back buffer. I would be willing to do that sometime. That's probably not too hard. I mean, it's definitely not too hard. I worry about the amount of stream time spent on doing OpenGL things because they're super not relevant. Like, GPU programming will be totally, like, building this profiler, every last thing I did in here is relevant to programming in my mind. Like, you should know every last thing that I did in here and understand why, like, how it was doing what it was doing and how I went from one state to the other and decided to move things around. Like, all that stuff is classic programming that I think will never not be relevant to training your brain. How to use OpenGL, literally no one will care about in 10 years. Like, the way we program GPUs today will be completely irrelevant. You will never need to know a single thing about how to call OpenGL or Vulkan or D3D or Metal or any of this other garbage. That'll just be gone, right? And it'll be replaced with hopefully something good, but probably just another crappy thing with a different name that somebody else screwed up. So, you know, I worry about spending too much time on, you know, GPU stuff because it's just not educational. It's really just completely transient and doesn't really benefit you much to know except in the instant. Mongorians, is it impossible to keep the entire codebase in mind when developing a larger project? How does this impact code design decisions in Handmade Hero? What about other larger projects, e.g. AAA titles? The answer is no, or I should say, I guess you said, is it impossible? Yes, it is impossible to keep the entire codebase in mind when developing a larger project. That is true, and I don't think there's ever been a programmer who could do that for a AAA title. But when you are developing large projects, you can still work around this limitation. And the way to work around that limitation is by reducing systems to understandable, sort of repeatable pieces before moving on, so that you can clearly understand how they would work when you come back to them. And so, like, for example, the debug system in Handmade Hero here is crazy, right? Like, the stuff we've been doing is super weird. And so if we were planning on Handmade Hero being like a very large project and lots of people having to come back to this debug code and do it, if this were not on stream, what we would then probably do is we'd spend a week or two like solidifying everything, making it as clear as possible, breaking some things out, you know, just like putting it into a state where it'd be very easy to understand how each piece worked. Because right now it's very like tightly integrated, and it's largely about how we got there when we were doing sort of our explorations. And so you have to keep that in mind as you scale up to larger projects, that oftentimes before moving out of a section for a while, you need to spend some time basically bolting it up into a place where when you come back to it, it's more obvious how it's supposed to work. Is the engine portion expected to be the largest chunk of the Handmade Hero project? Yes, definitely. Like I would say that after this debug code is done, I think we will mostly probably be working on game code-y stuff, but a lot of that will still be engine-y. Like we'll be making a sort of the final collision detector as we go, and we'll be making like some entity system stuff that's not necessarily hard welded to the game. And other things like that. But definitely, like, the point of this is engine programming. I'm not a game designer. I have nothing to say about game code at all, literally. And I have nothing to say about game design. So Handmade Hero is strictly an engine project, but in order to build an engine of any value, you have to have a game to go with it, or at least understand how a game would work with it. And so I felt like it was very important to make a game, not just an engine, because otherwise you don't know if you really made an engine that can do anything, right? Unless you actually prove, here's a game, it's interesting, the game looks like it should and feels like it should. Okay, then we know this engine can at least make a game. That's very important, I think. I don't think you can really make an engine in a vacuum and have it be very good. And so yeah. So mostly everything we do, I ballparked like 600 episodes at a minimum. Mostly everything we do in those 600 episodes will be engine code. It just, some of it will be more game related than others. Like some of it will be, okay, we're making an animation loop for a guy. That's kind of game code-y, but it'll still be mostly about how do we make animation loops, not about how do we program this particular person's animation loop, because that's not super interesting to me. Culverfly, can you please explain again the problem with texture loading? Why does it not work occasionally? Well, so the answer actually is we don't know. We tried doing what NVIDIA had suggested in their white paper to get texture overlaps on the GPU side. It turns out they don't actually implement that in their consumer level cards. And AMD seems to have a problem with it as well. So as far as I can tell, it's just a bad idea. And who knows why it's not working? Could be any number of reasons. So we will probably replace that with one that does not actually try to overlap it with two contexts. So, all right. But we'll get to that later. Like, just stay tuned. We'll fix that at some point. But again, since we don't have source code to drivers, we'll never really know what the bug is unless someone at NVIDIA debugs it. And sorry, this is an AMD card. So someone at AMD debugs it and tells us, right? All right, thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you want to follow along the series source code at home, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org. It comes with a source code so you can follow along and do experiments and learn from it and all that other good stuff. We also have a forum site you can go to if you want to ask questions. We have a Patreon page you can use if you want to support the video series. And we have a tweet bot, the tweet schedule, which will tell you the schedule for next week if you would like to come back next week and see our profiler get up to previously unknown heights of ballerism. That's it for today. Hope to see you back here next week. Until then, have fun programming, and I'll see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.